Welcome back. Today we will be going over a couple of the cameras that we have here in the Central Tech Interactive Multimedia class. Today I will be breaking down in full detail the Sony FS5. Now we have two Sony FS5 cameras in the classroom. They are going to be your primary camera if you're a video student, and first years you're going to get the opportunity to use them quite often. These are the cameras that we are going around and we're using for our short films. These are the cameras that we're using for our commercials, our classroom documentaries that we're working on. These are the cameras you'll have in your hand. Now, I've already went over them in class once, but I understand how confusing these cameras can be. So the following video is me breaking the camera down completely and then building it back up. It'll go down to its bare components, I'll build it back up, and I'll explain to you what all the buttons and settings do. If you have any questions about this camera, please feel free to ask me in class. If you need me to go out to your set and help you shoot with it, I will make sure your settings are set properly and teach you how to make sure that your settings are set properly. Well, without any further ado, I'm going to take you back to a video that I filmed last summer. I've re-edited it, recut it a little bit, and we're going to learn about the Sony FS5. The Sony FS5 was released in 2015. It shoots at 4K, it shoots at 1080p, and it'll shoot at standard definition as well as 720p. This camera has a bunch of capabilities that you will not find in your most general off-the-shelf consumer cameras. What you'll find in this camera is not only will you find 4K recording format, but when we're in 1080p we can shoot at slow-mo, up to 240 frames per second. As we've learned in class, most Hollywood films are filmed at 24 frames per second, so with the ability to go to 240 frames per second, we can go to 10 times slower than what we see it at. As you can see on the side of the FS5, there's a lot of buttons and there's a lot of switches. These buttons and switches are used to control this camera. We will be going over each and every one of these buttons as this video progresses. As we look, this camera doesn't look like a camera. I mean, it doesn't have all the accessories that it's needed. What we have here is the bare bones breakdown of the Sony FS5. I have nothing attached, no accessories attached to it, but this is the camera. If we remove the front cover, we will see that that is where the sensor is. If you can see in there, you will see that shiny reflective sensor. That is where all your film information is recorded and brought down into. We will also see it has all the buttons, has a lens mount, it has a battery holder, and if we look on the front, on the side here, in this form, this camera is a camera. All it needs left now is a lens attached and a battery, and we can use this camera on, say, the Steadicam. We could use it on a slider. It is a very light camera, not weighing very much. I task you with picking one up when it's broken down completely, just to see how much it weighs. But compared to our DSLR cameras, or most cameras you've used, you will find this to be a very light camera. Now, to make this camera work the way that we are used to a camera working, we need to put all the accessories on it. And what we have over here are the accessories that will attach to this camera, making it look like a camera that you're used to. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the hand grip. This is the hand grip. If you look into it, your hand will grab there. We have a strap. That strap is adjustable with Velcro. You want this strap to be snug onto your hand. You do not want to be the student that drops one of these cameras. Now, how do we attach this to that? Well, let me show you. On this side of the camera, you will see that there is a Sony cap. We're going to take that cap off. Now, this cap should be on if the handle grip is not on. If you do not have the grip attached to the camera, this cap should be on the camera. These caps should not be lost. If you have no idea where to put them, ask Mr. Akala. I will remind you where to put them. And if you don't know where to find them, ask me again and I will be able to point you in the right direction. But these caps should always either be on the camera or stored properly so that when we take the grips off, cap is there for us to use. Now, if we take a closer look at the grip, we will see that there is a cord, there is a mount on one side. There's also a button hidden down here. This button is assigned, and I'll talk about it later, but I want you to remember the button 6 is up under the grip. So when you put your hand in, your finger naturally comes back to that button. So where your ring finger is landing is about where that button's at under there. Don't forget about that button. There's also buttons on top. There's a rocker, there's a record button, there's a release lever that I'll talk about here in a little bit. But the important parts is there's a mount. On that mount you'll find a white dot, and there's a cord. And this cord should always be mounted like a horseshoe. It should always have a U in it, and it should always be U-ing up. It should not U down. Like so, it should be U'd up like that. If we look at the side of the camera, we will find a mini plug port and a mount. On that mount, you'll also find a white dot. The white dot goes to the white dot. But first, you want to make sure that that cord has a U. Now, if we look at this mini port here, it says remote. That remote is for this handle. We want to make sure that we plug in so that the cord is pointing up. We want that cord to cover up the remote part. We don't want it pointing down. We want it to look like that. We want it to plug and cover up that remote. If you plug it in early before you mount it, it's a lot easier to get this task done. So you mount that in, and then you make sure that that U U's up, and then you put white dot to white dot. And once you have the white dot to white dot, you twist it backwards or counterclockwise, and you'll hear it lock into place. To remove the grip, you will find that there is a button underneath the camera. It says grip release. If you push that button and then go clockwise with the handle will come off. So, white dot to white dot, counterclockwise. We'll lock it into place, push the button, hold the button and go clockwise with the grip, and you will remove that grip from the camera. Now, one of the buttons on the grip, a pattern, it has a texture to it. When you push this to the side, it doesn't push down, it comes over to the side. It releases that grip so you can twist it and put it in a position that you would like it. A normal shooting position will be straight up and down at a 90 degrees angle. This makes it easy for you to put your hand in and then shoot with the camera. But you might want to shoot from way up. You might hold the camera above you. And if you're holding the camera above you, turning it to where the grip is like that, it's going to make it easier. Or if you're shooting low to the ground, you can go down like that and hold the camera straight down. Where you put this grip is a matter of preference. If you want to shoot your entire film normally, but you want to put your grip like that, feel free to. Get comfortable with this camera. Make this camera an extension of you when you're filming. You want to make it comfortable in your hands. After we attach the grip, there's some more accessories we still need to attach. One thing this camera does not have, if you do not put it on, is a microphone. So right now we're going to put on the microphone handle. This is a microphone handle. If we look at it, what we'll see on this microphone handle is on the very top we have another record button. We also have a rocker. This record button has a lock button so you don't accidentally push it. I suggest you leave it in the hold position unless we know we're using that button. Then we can unlock it. But if we're not going to use that button, it's better to keep it in the hold just so you don't accidentally start or stop recording when you don't mean to. We also have a hot shoe. There's also a mounting hole. And there's a mounting hole. There's a mounting hole. There's a mounting hole. Know that you can mount, per se, the LCD screen to any of these mounting brackets. We also have input number 2. If we look at the camera itself, we will see that there is an input 1 XLR input on the back, very back of the camera. So we do not need the microphone handle to attach a microphone, an external microphone to this camera. But we can attach 2.
but we have to have the microphone handle for that second input. It's right there. We will also see at the very top that this gray mesh right here is the microphone for this camera. That is the internal microphone. So without this handle attached, this camera does not record audio unless we attach a secondary external microphone. Now, to attach this handle to this camera is a very tricky process. What we are going to do is we are going to find these two locking bolts on there. We'll look at the top of the camera and we'll see that there are two locking nuts on it. We will put the camera in that place, and then we will lock it down. Very important that we actually take the moment to lock these down and make sure that they're snug. We want both of them tight, and then we can lift it up. Not too hard, actually. Now the camera's coming together. We have the microphone handle to it. We have the grip on the side. It's starting to look like a camera, but the most important part of our camera has not been attached yet. We still need to attach the lens. Without a lens, you cannot capture anything with the camera. All the camera is a light box. All it's doing is capturing light and recording that. And without a way to focus that light, it does us nothing. Try it. Turn your camera on and film with just an open sensor. Just open that sensor up like that and film. See what happens. No matter what your exposure is, it's going to be pure white because it's not focused light. There's nothing for it to focus on. So we have to attach a lens. Now we are lucky with our Sony FS5 cameras that we have multiple lenses we can use. The one you will find normally attached to the lens is right here. This is a Sony 18-105 f4 servo lens. The servo lenses have a rocker on the lens. And when you zoom in and zoom out, the focus will not shift. Compared to our DSLR cameras, if you take a DSLR lens and zoom it in, it's going to shift the focus ever so slightly. With our servo lenses, we will not have that problem. On this lens, what you will find is that there'll be a lens shade. We'll talk about that. On the front will be a lens cap, so if you put this lens on and you're seeing nothing but pure black, check your lens cap, it might still be on. On the back, we have a back lens cap. If this lens is not attached to the camera, there has to be a cap on it. Do not take this lens off and leave it open and walk away from it. That gets dirt, that gets dust, that gets grime into the camera lens, which will be a headache for me to get clean at a later date. So take your time, take care of the equipment, and make sure that when there is not a camera attached to this lens, you put a cap on it. It's not that hard, it takes just a couple seconds. We will also see that on this lens there are two rings. The front ring controls focus, the back ring controls zoom. You can also zoom with the rocker on the lens. With this lens attached, you can also use the rocker on the grip and the rocker on this grip. So there are multiple ways to zoom this lens in while it's attached. So how do we attach the lens to the camera? With the cap removed, you will see that there is a metal mount around this ring. You do not want to go around and touch the contacts. That's the little brass parts here. You don't want to touch those. Leave those alone. But on the side, you will find a white dot. If we take the cap off of the front of the camera, which just like the lens, if there's not a lens attached to this camera, this cap needs to be on. We do not want to get the sensors dirty on these cameras, so we leave a cap on unless the lens is attached. When we take that cap off, you will see those little brass contacts down here. You don't want to touch those. In honesty, you don't want to touch anything in this. You can brush the aluminum, your hand might hit that, that's fine. You do not want to touch that sensor. That sensor is right there, and if you look, there's actually a protective cover, which is a good thing, but we don't want to touch that protective cover. If we break this sensor or get a fingerprint on this sensor, we can just go ahead and call this camera quits and send it back to Sony, and hopefully they can fix it for us. But we do not want to touch the inside of this camera. What we see here, it might be hard to see on the video, but you will see a white dot on the lens right above this screw here below the A-mount system tag. Right there, there's a white dot. You're going to take the white dot on the edge of the lens and you're going to line it up. And when you line it up, the lens will fall into place. And then you want to screw clockwise. And once screwed clockwise, that lens is attached. I can now pick the whole camera up by the lens mount. You don't want to do what I just did. You don't want to carry this camera around by the lens. But I am doing it as an example to show that it is attached. That camera is not falling off. It's because it's locked into place. Now, why don't we want to carry around the camera by the lens? Well, this camera, I told you, it doesn't weigh a whole lot. It really doesn't. But there's two pieces of aluminum holding these together. And we do not want to break the mount off of either. So, make sure that when you hold and handle the camera, you're holding it by the grip, or you can pick it up by the camera itself. Don't pick it up by the lens mount. We now have a camera that has come together, and it is most all the pieces are there. We have a lens, we have our top mount, we have our side mount, we have our camera body. With that all together, we can film something. All we have to do is put memory cards in it and a battery, and we have a camera that can film. Now, how do we make that a little better for us? Well, there's a couple more accessories that we can attach. On the top of the audio mount, where input 2 was, you will find a little ring. That ring has a lock to it. And that is a shock mount. A shock mount has a bunch of rubber in it so that it can move around freely. This is the place where we'll attach a shotgun microphone. We want to attach the microphone in the shock mount because the microphone needs to have a little give to it. That microphone's going to move a little bit. Either attached to the camera or in the equipment room, you will find a couple different types of microphones. One of them is a shotgun microphone. Right here we have an NTG4 Rode shotgun mic. There are two different mounting systems. One has tape around it and one has a little guard that slides over it. Right now I'm using the one with tape. That tape is what goes in the shock mount. Without the tape, if I put it in without the tape, you will see that that microphone can be slid in, it can be slid out, it moves around all over the place. Well, that's way too much movement. So what we're going to do is with this open, we'll place the area that's taped and we'll clamp it down. Once we turn that lock on, we'll see that that microphone is really steady in place. It's not coming out, it's not sliding forward, sliding back. That is pretty locked in place. Now, if we look, we'll see that this microphone is not attached. It's just in the mount. Well, that does us no good. That means this microphone's not recording any audio. What you will need is an XLR cable. There are 2 or 3 little coiled cables in the classroom meant for attaching this microphone to these cameras. You can also use one of the big 25-foot cables, but that's a lot of cable you have to wrangle. So I suggest you get one of the coiled cables off the wall. Now, it's pretty simple. They only mount one way. You can't put the wrong end in the wrong end. That'll click into place. And now we have this end. You might be asking, which XLR input do I put it into? You've already showed it. We've seen that there's one on the handle and there's one on the back of the camera. Well, if this is the only microphone you're using, you attach it to the one in the back of the camera. That is input 1. Your camera is going to like input 1 a lot more than input 2. Now, if we have another microphone running in input 1, such as a lapel microphone or something along those lines, we could put the shotgun into input 2, but it's best practice to put your shotgun into input 1. My preference is to run the cable around the grip like that, but you could also run the cable above the grip. On the other side of the grip, wherever that cable lets you put it, you can put it there. You just want to make sure that it's snug and it's not beating the edge of your camera. Now we're almost there. We've almost got this camera fully assembled. It's weighted forward, it's falling forward on us, so let's balance that camera out by putting a battery in it. In the equipment room, in the battery chest, you will find 2 different batteries that'll fit this camera. Both of them say Sony, and both of them have a blue stripe below it. We have a BPU 30 and a BPU 60. What's the difference between the two? Well, you tell me. One of them's gonna film about twice as long. The BPU 60 has about twice the amount of battery life compared to the BPU 30. If you were going out onto location, or if you're going out into the back 40 to film, you'll probably want to grab the BPU 60. It is a heavier battery. going to weigh your camera down. So if you're just filming in the class, the BPU 30 might be all the energy you need. Now on these batteries there is a little meter. It says E to F, and there is a button. If you push the button, a little light bar will show up. It will tell you how much charge is in this battery. It's a good thing. It's a quick, easy check. You can tell that this battery is full. It has all the green bars. It'll last for a while. Now how do I put this into that? Well, you're going to look on the bottom of the battery is going to be 5 little copper inserts. On the other side there's nothing. These 5 inputs go down. You don't want them pointing up. You'll take those inputs, you'll face them down, you'll slide the battery in all the way to the back, and then you pull down. So you take those inputs, the 5 side down, you put the battery in the camera, and you push it all the way back. Once it's pushed all the way back, you'll push it down. You will hear a click. If you don't hear the click, the battery's not mounted. If you were worried that the battery's not on, pull on it a little bit. If it comes back out, it's not locked into place. Now, to remove the battery, there is a button right here. It says battery release. It actually says bat release. It's not going to release Batman, it's going to release the battery. You will push that button and push up, and then pull out. The battery will come out. Works the same with the little battery. You just have to put your hand in there a little farther to get it to go in. Now, with the big battery attached, the camera becomes well more balanced and it's not rolling forward any longer. And just when you think we're done, we're not quite done yet. Now, this camera has 2 possibilities to actually see what you're filming. Now, the good thing about digital is that I can actually see what's being recorded to my card. There's 2 ways to do it on this camera. We have the eyepiece back here. That is a great way. That is an electronic viewfinder. Whatever you're seeing through the lens is going to show up back here. Now, you place this up to your eye. It could be your right or left, whatever's more comfortable. Once again, make this camera experience your camera experience. Mr. Akala likes to shoot with his left eye. I like to shoot with my left eye. My right eye is not as strong, so I put it up to my left eye. Most people like to shoot through their right eye. It is up to you. Now, when you're using this inside, it'll be perfect. It'll be great. But when you go outside, the electronic viewfinder really becomes hard to look through because it's so bright outside that it's just hard to look in there. And that is why these are around. These are little eye cups. Now, they can be placed for your right eye. They can be placed for your left eye. It does not matter. How those attach is you just kind of manhandle them into the place. There's a groove on the camera, and there is a little running edge on the eye mount itself. You put those together. To remove it, you just kind of pull it off. You'll also find that there is rubber on this eyepiece. This rubber part never comes off. Only this. The other way to view video off of this camera is with a LCD viewfinder. You will find this back wherever you found the camera. These should be along the camera at all times. Most of the time they're mounted. If they're not mounted, then they should be close at hand. First, what we're going to want to do is you'll find that on this LCD screen there's a couple switches, and then there's this movable mount here. Now on this mount, you can unscrew and take this off. This is the mounting bracket. This is what we attach to the camera. Earlier I showed you on the grip that there were multiple mounting holes. We can attach this mount anywhere there's a mounting hole. We can attach it in the back. We could attach it to the top. Most of the time you will find it mounted at this top hole. We're going to take that mounting bracket and we're going to screw it into place. Once it's screwed into place, we'll make sure it's nice and tight. We don't want that moving around like that. We want to make sure that that is locked into place. So we'll mount to where there's no movement there. With it loose, we can put it anywhere along that axis. Get it comfortable to where you're shooting. How are you shooting? Are you handheld? Are you throwing it on a tripod? That all depends on where we're going to mount this screen. That mounting bracket mounted, you will find that there is a hole in the screen mount. That slides right onto place, and then there is a screw on the bottom to lock it into place. Now with it mounted and screwed into place, we have an LCD screen. It can rotate forward, backwards, up and down, and it can close in on itself. It can also open out on itself as well, so we can put this screen and position it to where we need it as filmmakers. Put it where it's convenient, put it where it makes most sense for you as the filmmaker. Now it's not going to work if we don't attach the cable. Along the edge of the top grip, you will find a bunch of cable holders. I suggest you put that cable in the cable holder just to keep it out of our way. We don't want it floating and free around. Now we'll see that it's mounted to the front of the camera. There's also a grip mount here on the camera itself. And now that cable is out of our way, we still have to attach the cable to the camera. Behind the grip on the camera body, you will find a little rubber flap. Above that little rubber flap, it'll say LCD. We're going to open that flap up. That flap doesn't come off, so don't rip it off the camera body. It's there to keep dust out when we're not attached. So you just open it up like that, and on our cable, there's two sides. One side has an arrow. That arrow is going to point out. We'll open up the rubber hatch, and we will slide the arrow down into the proper location. Make sure that you don't just force it in, make sure that you get it to where it fits right, and then you will push it until you hear it click. Now it is mounted properly. Now we have a full working camera. We have our top grip, we have our handle grip, we have our lens attached, LCD attached, microphone attached, electronic viewfinder shade, battery, everything's attached on this camera, and we are ready to film. Now looking at the side of the camera, we are going to be probably overwhelmed with the amount of buttons and switches that this camera has to offer. It has a lot of capability. It can do a lot of things. That's why there's a lot of buttons and switches. Now, probably one of the most important switches we need to know about is how to turn the camera on. That's right up here. Right above the 4K logo, you will find a switch. It's our power switch. You flip it onto the on position, and the camera will turn on. If you could see the LCD screen, you would be seeing that it's showing Sony at this moment. So we've turned our camera on. It is a digital camera, and so it films everything to a digital file. Unlike a lot of consumer cameras, this camera does not have an internal memory. We have to put our memory cards into it. Now, in the back by the battery, you will find a little thing that says 4K XD cam. That's a door. It opens up just as so, it just pulls straight out. It doesn't come off, it just opens up. Now within there, you will find two slots. This camera has the ability to film to two different SD cards. That means I can film the same footage onto two different memory cards as a backup. I could fill one memory card up and it rolls to the next memory card. I could film 4K onto one memory card and 1080p proxy on the other memory card. A lot of different features. It's a really nice having two memory cards on this camera. Now, if you want to film 4K, you're going to need to get a special memory card from Mr. Akala. You'll have to remind him that you're shooting 4K. He'll get the memory cards for you. If you're shooting regular, any memory card will work in regular 1080p. Once you get the memory cards, this camera takes the SD card. These little SD cards are the same ones we're using in the DSLR cameras. They're the ones we're using in the C100. It's the one we're using in just about all the equipment we have here in IMM. Now, if you look really closely, we'll see little logos. These little logos are telling you how they go in. You take the shiny, bright name side of our memory card, and we face it towards the battery door, and they'll slide right in. Now, if it doesn't want to slide easily in, do not force it. If you cannot get a memory card inserted, please ask a friend or ask Mr. Akala. Once it slides in, you're going to push it all the way in until you hear it click. So, to reiterate, name side, shiny side, and towards the battery, into the slot. If it has, make sure there's no resistance, it just slides right in. push it till it clicks. Now, to get them out, we will open the door, push the memory card, and it'll slide out. Push it in, it'll click, it'll slide right out. Memory cards are good. Once your memory cards are in, please close the memory card door. It will not film with the door open. Now there's a little window back here. Once we're actually filming with this camera, you will see a red dot show up here, and you'll see little red dots under A or B. That's telling you what memory card is being filled up. So once we have the camera fully put together, we have memory cards in the camera, and we have our camera turned on. What is our next step? The first button on this side of the camera that we're going to want to see and use is the menu button. It is right here. It says menu above it. It has a roller down here, and that's telling me that when I hit the menu button, I can use this roller to work. This roller is also a button. You can push it. And so you can select and then set with this button. Now, if you have the handle grip attached, when you're in the menu, you can also use the joystick. The joystick on the handle grip right here, it works like a D-pad, left, right, up, and down. It's also a button, so you can push that to select. Now, with everything attached and we know where the menu button is and how to turn the camera on, let's look at some settings that we need to adjust first. Once we turn our camera on, we want to hit the menu button. Well, that's going to open up this little screen right here. Now, if you don't have the LCD screen attached, this menu button shows up in the electric viewfinder as well. So you don't have to have the LCD screen to adjust these settings. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to hit menu, open up this window, we're going to go to the very bottom menu. It looks like a file cabinet. What we're looking at is our system settings. What we want to do is we want to roll all the way down, or if you roll up, it'll start at the bottom. We want to go to where it says media format. Now, we've talked about formatting in class, but what formatting does is going to erase everything on a memory card. It's very important to know that when you use a memory card from the IMM class, that it's your job to download all your footage. The next student, because we have both morning and afternoon using these same cameras and the same memory cards, the next student's going to come in and format that memory card. So, if you didn't have enough time to download all your footage, please make sure Mr. Cullen knows so that he can set that memory card away for the next day. We don't want to lose your footage by formatting it, but we have to have the memory cards ready to go for the next class. So it is your job as the student, as the worker, to make sure that all your footage is downloaded and saved and backed up onto your personal hard drive, and not just sitting on a memory card that you've turned back in thinking that it might be good to download tomorrow. So the first thing we're going to do is menu, the file cabinet, roll up to media format, and format the memory cards. This is not a long process, but it will take about 10 to 13 seconds to format the memory cards. Now, if we're using both memory cards, we want to format both. We want them both ready to go, both ready to be used out in the field. Once it's done, it'll tell you complete. There's a little button on the top that says OK. We'll click OK, and then we'll have to go back into menu, back to media format, and we'll hit memory card B and format memory card B as well. Once the memory cards are formatted, we're still not done in the menu. Now, down here in the system menus, we can have status check, we can set a profile, we can assign some of our buttons and dials, we can make sure our clock is set properly. Really, you don't need to go through here very often to do anything. There's not a whole lot that you need to know in the system other than media format. We also have our recording lamps. It says recording lamp front, recording lamp back. Now, anytime that you are filming someone in the interactive multimedia class, I want you to make sure that the recording front button is on. I do not really care about the back button, but the front button needs to be on. We will make sure that anyone we are filming knows that the filming light is on, so that when we are filming them, they know that the camera is rolling. We do not want to be a paparazzi. We don't want to try to hide ourselves. We want them to know that we're recording them. So you can roll through the system formats here and see, or the system settings, and see if there's anything that you need to turn on, but really there's not a whole lot you need to adjust in the systems. Now let's walk our way through the system. The first one, the very top button in our system is end. If we hit end, it's going to take us out of the menu. Below that is our camera, all our camera settings. Now the first setting is ISO or gain. We can either run ISO or gain on this camera. In this class, we're gonna probably use ISO because that's what we're used to with the DSLR cameras. Gain is just a different way to express ISO, sensitivity to the film plane. In gain, we're talking about percentages. In ISO, we're talking about numbers. It's easier to understand ISO than gain, so we will use ISO. Now this camera, we will talk about it when we get to that point. The ISO is not selectable like it is on our DSLRs. We can't just set an ISO and roll. We have to use a switch that tells us we're using either a low, a medium, or a high ISO. So we come to our camera setting, we come to ISO set, and then we have an H, M, and an L. And we can tell our camera what ISO it'll be using at those selected settings. This camera goes all the way up to 32,000 ISO. That's really high. It's going to produce a really grainy shot, but it also lets you shoot really dark at night. I wouldn't take this camera above 10,000, and I will have the cameras initially set at 6400 for our high ISO. Our medium ISO will be set at 3200, and our low will be at 1000. We want to shoot at the lowest ISO as possible. This camera does not go below an ISO 1000, so we will be shooting it at our low setting. Below ISO set is gain set. We have an automatic ISO limiter. We won't be using automatic in this camera, so it won't set us very much. We have our white balance presets. We're going to talk about white balance once we get to those switches. We have a black balance. Now, just as our cameras need to know what pure white is, our cameras need to know what pure black is. I have ran a black balance on all the cameras, so there's really no need to do it. But to successfully complete a black balance, what you will do is you will take the lens cap, you will put the lens cap onto the camera, and then you will tell it to black balance. It's going to tell you, attach the lens cap before executing. Once you click OK, it's going to take probably quite a few seconds. It's going to take a little bit of time to complete a black balance. But once it's done, a true black point has been set for our camera. We're done with the black balancing. We have our auto exposure shifting, we have our lens compensation, we have ND filter sets. So we can set a whole lot of different things in here. One we might want to look at is our slow and quick. If we go to our slow motion and our slow and quick, we can tell it what type of frame rate we're doing. As I talked about earlier, if we're shooting 1080p, 240 is where we want to be at. That's 10 times slower than our regular film. But we can also see that it goes all the way up to 960. But then at 960, we're at a really low quality. We don't really want to be up there. 240 gets us good quality and really good slow motion. There's a bunch of other different settings on here. We can go through the picture profiles as well on this camera and adjust them, leave them at their regular settings, and use the ones that are there. There's no need for us to be going in and changing the presets. Below the camera setting is two arrows, so one going left and one going right. That's our recording input and output. This is very important. We're not going to look really much at the video out. What we want to look at is the recording set. This is telling me what frame rate, what quality, what resolution I'm going to be filming at. Now, we have a 4K camera, so we should probably be shooting at 4K. Why give up data that we could use later in the editing bay when we can capture it now? Let's get rid of it in the editing bay if we don't need it. Why limit ourselves? So, how does this work? If we come into record set, you will see a few different buttons. The first one is file format. There's 3 different file formats in this camera. We have XAVC QF HD, we have XAVC HD, and AVC HD. Now, QF HD is 4K. If you want to shoot 4K, we're going to be in the QF HD. XAVC HD is regular 1080p, and AVC HD is 1080p as well. There is no reason for us to be using AVC HD. We'll be using one of the XAVCs. Now, to shoot 4K, we go to QF HD, then we go to record format. From here we have 2160 30p, 2160 30p, 2160 24, and 2160 24. Alongside those, we also have 100 megabytes and 60 megabytes for each. Now, when you're shooting 4K, you need to know, are we shooting this in 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second? It's your decision. It's your project. It's not mine. You as the director, you as the creative mind need to decide, are we going to be shooting in 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second? Now, once you figure that out, if you're going to be shooting in 4K, you're going to pick whichever one says 100 megabytes beside it. Once again, why would we give up resolution when we can capture it? We can get rid of it later in post. There's no reason to limit ourselves now. So we want to shoot the highest quality this camera has to offer, and that'll be the 100 megabytes on whichever frame rate you decide. If we go to XAVC HD, it's going to take a few moments to set the camera up properly for us. And then we go to record format, and we'll have 1080p 60, or we have 1080 60p, 1080 60i, 1080 30p, 1080 24p, and 720 60p. And you'll see that this one says 50 megabytes or 35. Once again, there's no reason for us to pick either the 35 or 25 megabytes. We'll always be picking the 50. And once again, it comes down to what frame rate do we want. Do we want that ultra realistic look at 60 frames per second? 60i is nothing but an old school term for 30 frames per second. So we won't be using 60i, we might use 60p. We will be using the 24 or 30 frames per second most of the time. Below that, we're going to find an audio node. And here we can come in here and tell our audio what to do. Now, the one we want to look at is our channel 1 and our channel 2. We want to make sure that channel 1 is set to channel 1 input and channel 2 is set to channel 2 input, unless you're changing that up for any which reasons. If you're going to want to use channel 2 as channel 1, then you're going to want to make sure to put that in there. You just want to make sure that your audio is recording to the right setting. Below that, we have it's just a screen, and this is our display settings. We can come in here and turn our histogram on. We can turn our zebras on. We can turn our peaking on. All of which we went over in class. We can go in here and really set this display. Below that, we have a time code and then a Wi-Fi setting. If we're using this camera over Wi-Fi or with GPS, I'll be helping you in setting that up properly, so there's no reason to go through that menu now. And for time codes, probably the same thing. If you're going to want to use a time code, which means you're going to be shooting multiple cameras, we'll have to really get it set just right. So make sure you ask Mr. Akala before you start using that. And now we've gone through the menu settings. We know how to set our recording formats. We know how to make sure our audio is putting it into the right place. We know how to format our memory cards. We're almost there, guys. We're almost ready to take this camera out and shoot amazing things. Now on the side of the camera, we will find a lot of different buttons. So we're gonna go through a few of them for you. Right beside the 4K, there's another little panel. This panel actually comes open. We can close it to get it out of our way, but we can open it up. What we have in here is our audio levels. Now we have channel 1 and we have channel 2. And we can turn this knob to make our microphones louder or quieter right there on the side of the camera. We also have a switch that says auto or manual. We're going to keep it manual. We're not going to be using automatic in this class. No reason for that switch to be turned to auto. When you get out in the field, you might flip it to auto if you don't have the time to really adjust your audio. But here in class, we'll be on manual because you'll be adjusting it the right way. Below that window, we have a menu button, which we've talked about. We have a display button. What this will do is it'll put different things on and off of our LCD or electronic viewfinder. It'll take everything off. It'll put all your settings on there. It's just depends on what you would like to see off of that. Below that, we have thumbnail. If we hit thumbnail, we're going to review what we've filmed. That's what the thumbnail button does. Is it gives us a little thumbnail of everything that we filmed, so we can actually go back and review it. Once you hit thumbnail, you're going to use the select and set button to pick what you want to film, or you can use the joystick on the grip. Over here, we have a little button that says card selection, slot selection. It's going to select, am I filming to A or B? Down this reg right here, we have buttons 1, 2, and then focus. One is S and Q. This is how we turn our slow motion on. If we want to shoot slow motion, we're going to push this button and we're in slow motion. Push it again and we're out. Below that we have our picture profiles. We hit this and then use this wheel or the D-pad on the other side and we can select the right picture profile for the film. Now if you select a picture profile and tell it to be on it, it'll actually update real time into your LCD so you can know for sure that you're in the right picture profile. Below that we have focus, we have auto, we have manual, and we have push for auto. Once again, our focus is going to be in manual. We don't want to be using automatic focus. If you are using the parabolic Sony 18-105, it has automatic focus. It will work. If you're using one of the Canon lenses, it will not. But we will be in manual anyway. If you need a quick automatic adjustment, you can push the push auto and it'll automatically adjust for you. Once again, we're going to get good at turning that focus ring to get the focus we need. Now if we come to the very top, we have 3 buttons up here. The front one is the record button. We push it, the camera starts recording. We don't have to use that one because there's also one on the hand grip and one on the top grip. So we can use any one of those 3 buttons to start and stop recording. Below that we have a hold button. That's just going to lock all our settings so that we don't accidentally bump any of these and change them. And beside that we have a full auto button. We push that button, the light turns green, the camera is in a full automatic mode. We will not be using that button. Now if we continue down this camera, on here we have a status update. What it's going to do is it'll pull up our audio channels real quick so we can actually see what's being recorded. We can also see a bunch of different settings if we scroll through with our wheel over here. What are my ISO sets? How full are my memory cards? How much battery life do I have left? There's a bunch of different status elements that this button lets us go through. Below that we have iris and push auto. So if we hit the iris button, we can change our iris with our D-pad and our wheel on the other side. Over here on the grip, there is a wheel on the very front that lets us adjust our iris. That's our aperture. If we push that and then we see an A on the screen, that means it's in automatic mode. If it's not in automatic mode and you push auto, it's just going to really quickly automatically adjust for the setting. Once again, we don't want to use automatic mode, so there's no reason for that button for us. Down here at the very bottom, we have ISO gain, white balance, and shutter. If we hit the ISO button, it's going to go into automatic ISO. It's either automatic or a preset. I talked about our presets where we can adjust them. That's what this front switch is. We have low, medium, and high. We hit that and the ISO automatically changes to wherever we set it. If we want to automatically adjust our ISO, we just hit the button, but we won't be using automatic. Beside that is white balance. White balance is very important. If we push that button, then we can actually hit the set button, which I'll show you. We have to hit that button until we see the white balance icon on our screen, and it'll blink. And when it's blinking, there's a button on the very front of the camera right here. So it's the blinking white balance setting on the screen. Once it's blinking, we can hit white balance set, which is right there, and that'll set our white balance. Now we can do 2 presets. We can do a preset, which is found in the menu, and we can set an A and a B. And it depends on what setting this switch is on, depends on which one we'll be working with. This means we can go out early and get our white balance locked into place before we actually bring talent on set. And then our shutter, if we push it, it'll let us use that wheel on the grip to change the shutter speed. We can dial that shutter speed down to where it needs to be. The shutter should always be 2 times that of what our film rate is. So if we're shooting 30, it should be 60. If we're shooting 24, it should be 48. And if we hit it again, it'll give us a little A, which turns our automatic mode on, which we won't be using. Now on this side of the camera, we still have a few more settings. Up here, there's a big silver knob. If you look, when I turn this knob, it says 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. In clear. Now when it says clear, it's off. 1, 2, and 3 just progressively get darker. What it does is it lets us use a bigger aperture or a bigger iris out in the outside when it's really bright. This just darks everything. It makes everything darker. It's called a neutral density filter. It's right here. Below that we have a preset and we have a variable. When it is set to preset, you'll hear that camera change. or you'll see 3 progressive getting darkers. When we have it at variable, we have to turn the silver knob on, but then this big wheel down here acts as a variable ND filter, so we can progressively get darker. So we can get all our settings set the way we want it and then really dial our exposure in with our ND filter. For the switch here, it says ND or iris. If it's set on iris, when I roll that wheel, it actually changes my aperture. We want to make sure that switch is on ND and that's on variable, and then when we roll it, we can really put our camera exactly where we want it. And with that, guys, I think I went over all of the buttons on this camera. There are a lot of buttons on here, a lot of features. It is a very powerful camera, and it is a camera we'll be using quite often for a lot of our projects. So get used to it. Go out and practice with it when you have time.
Welcome back. I hope that you now have a better understanding of the FS5. If, like I mentioned at the beginning, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. If you are out in the field somewhere and you can't get back to the class, which shouldn't be a problem with these cameras because they don't leave very often. But if you do have questions, you can make sure that you put a comment down below. I'll get back with you as soon as I can on that. Like always, like, comment, or subscribe, and I will see you in the next class. Thank you.